Now it's time to talk about expressions and operators in C#. But before we jump into that, because of the string dot formatting, I want to talk briefly about literals. Literals are when you type numbers or strings directly into the source code. Sometimes they're referred to as hard-coded, since these literals aren't really going to change at runtime since they're not variables. There is a special literal we're going to explore later called null, and that means the variable does not point to data in memory. We can use suffixes to denote a specific type of literal if necessary. This is very useful when you're working with numbers. So here's some examples. If we put the literal 1024, that is going to default to an int. 3.14 will default to a double. If we would like that to be a float, we can put a capital F after it. That's that suffix I was talking about. We can also use the suffix capital M for decimal, and I usually keep that straight in my head by thinking M for money. True and false are the Boolean literals. We can also have character literals, where we would have a single quote, and a string literal as a double quote. We can also embed special literal characters. I've already showed you that /n will give us a new line. That slash is called an escape character. In the table to the right, I'm demonstrating several common literal sequences. A null is /0, alerts or beeps are /a. We see the new lines, tabs, backspaces, all of these special characters that you'll see in a typical text file, or for printing, typically have escape sequences. If you want a literal backslash in a string, you put the backslash twice. There's also a special character, the @ symbol, that you can put before any string. And if you put that before a string, the slashes will automatically be escaped. So that can save you a little bit of time and effort. We usually use that @ symbol when we're working with paths in the file system, because it looks a little weird to have C:\\. Now let's talk about expressions. An expression is a series of operators and operands. Operators are the symbols that represent an operation. They return a single result. Example of operators: plus, minus, divide, multiply. The operands are the actual data elements that are used as input for operators. Expressions can be combined using operators to create even more complex expressions, and as you're building real programs, these expressions are going to be the core of what actually does your work. Evaluation is what we call the process of applying the operators to the operands in the proper sequence to produce the right result. So here's a list of some of the common operators. There are more operators than this. These are the ones you're most likely to run into. And the order of this table is the order of operations. Back when you took your first math classes, you learned "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally" for the order of operations for math. We have those rules in .NET. C# will definitely, when you're doing math, do the orders of operations correctly. But there are other types of operators, and they all have their own specific order as well. The primary operators are methods, indexers, x++ and x-. Plus will add 1 to a number. Minus will subtract 1 to a number. And the new keyword, which we'll get into later for objects. These operations will always be performed first, before any others. The unary operators can make something positive or negative. The exclamation point in C# means not. So if you have a true or false statement, if you put an exclamation point in front of it, it will reverse it. ++x is different than x++. When you use these in an expression, x++ will return the current value of x and then add 1. ++x will add 1 and then return the new value. It's very important. We're going to have a code sample later that's going to show you that in action. Multiplicative, we have multiply, divide, and modulus. Modulus gives you the remainder of division. Then we have our additive, plus minus. Relational operators always return true or false. Is the first value less than the second value? True or false? Is it greater than? Is it less than or equal? Greater than or equal? The equality operator is very important and sometimes confusing. The equal sign will assign a value to a variable. Double equal returns true or false. Is this value equal to the second value? Yes or no? 3 double equal 3 is true. 3 double equal 2 is false. Not equal is the opposite of double equal. When we have multiple expressions, we can use the conditional and or the conditional or to chain them together. So we could say something, if 3 is greater than 5 and 4 is greater than 6. That would be false and false, which would return false. In a conditional and, both sides of the expression must be true for the and to return true. For the conditional or, only one of them has to be true. Then at the bottom, the last thing is we have assignment. We have our equal, and then we have some mathematical expressions that are tied to the equal sign. Times equal, divided equal, plus equal, minus equal. We'll get into those later, but they're basically a shorthand for doing a math operation and assigning the new value to the variable at the same time. We already mentioned that things get evaluated in a certain order. We call this precedence. When operators are in the same category level, the order is determined depending on what type of operator it actually is. Most of the operators are left associative, so if all the operators have the same precedence, you're just going to read them from left to right and do them in order. Assignment operators are the most notable right to left operators. So for example, if we have an integer x that we're going to assign to the expression 2 times 4 plus 3, we have to actually do the math before we can assign the final value to x. So the equal sign is right associative because the expression on the right-hand side has to be completed before x receives a value. I'm just going to draw special attention to this since I already mentioned it briefly. Common point of confusion. The equal sign assigns a value. The double equal compares two values. When we start to get into if statements and expressions, the number one mistake new people make is swapping equal and double equal. X equal 5 sets the variable x equal to 5. X double equal 5 returns true or false depending on what the value of x is. If x is 5, it'll be true. If it's anything else, it'll be false.